We've been told that there's 100 to 110,000 people along the U.S.-Mexico border right now. 660,000 that are displaced in Mexico from other countries. 250,000 Mexican population planning to make their way up here. So you're talking about 1 million people.
Keeping our republic is on the line, and it requires patriots with great passion, dedication, and eternal vigilance to preserve our freedoms. Jenny Beth Martin is the co-founder of Tea Party Patriots. She is an author, a filmmaker, and one of Time Magazine's most influential people in the world. But the title she is most proud of is mom to her boy-girl twins. She has been at the forefront, fighting to protect America's core principles for more than a decade. Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show.
In this episode of the Jenny Beth Show, I traveled to Del Rio, Texas to interview the Verde County Sheriff Joe Martinez. Verde County sits on the border with Mexico and has a population of about 48,000 people. In 2014, we interviewed Sheriff Martinez for our documentary, The Border States of America, where even back then, we were ringing the alarm about the crisis on our southern border. Sadly, not much has changed. In fact, under Joe Biden, it has gotten much worse. In 2021, Biden's first year in office, illegal border crossings surged to their highest levels ever. Then, in 2022, the record was broken again. And now, with the expiration of Title 42, we are anticipating a new surge on the border. But don't take it from me. Let's hear directly from a border sheriff who is on the front lines of this crisis every single day. Sheriff Martinez, thank you so much for letting us come here to your office. We're on location at the Verde Sheriff's Office. So thank you very much for doing this podcast and hosting us here today.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So you have been sheriff here for 14 years, and your county is right along the border in the Del Rio sector of the border. What kind of changes have you seen happen over the last couple of years, and what just tell us what's going on right now, the border?
So in the last couple of years, for example, in 2021, we had an increase of individuals coming across 260,000, and that number was more than the previous 9 years combined.
Wow.
Last year, there was 480,000 that came across in 2022 into the Del Rio sector, not just Del Rio, Texas, but the Del Rio sector of Border Patrol.
Right.
And this year, they're on pace to exceed even those numbers. So, there's no telling what, the lifting of Title 42 is going to do to us, or to not just us, but to the entire southwest border.
Wow. So in 2021, it was 240,000. Is that what you said?
260,000.
60,000. And that was all of the previous 9 years combined. And then the next year, that number doubled.
Yes.
And then we expected to be even higher than this year.
Yes.
I just needed to reinforce that those are tremendous numbers. They're huge numbers. You were featured in our documentary that we did, Border States of America, back in 2014. And I learned so much from you that just has stayed in my mind all these years, because the interview with you was the first interview of a border sheriff that I did. Since then, I've talked to a lot of border sheriffs, but the one with you just stood out because you were showing me the map and just explaining to me what goes on at the entire border. Your job as sheriff, you're not patrolling the border necessarily normally, right? Is that Border Patrol who is patrolling the border? And then what does your department do as sheriff?
So it's Border Patrol's job. That's their job, the immigration. Our job is make sure that our citizens are safe and protected. So we, keep our community safe in times of turmoil. We support our federal partners, and by us supporting our federal partners, it helps keep our community safe.
Okay, and your county doesn't have as much human beings who are coming through. It's a little bit further south, right, where the people are coming through that make up that 260,000. Is that correct?
So the The 260,000, the majority of those people came through Valverde County, through
Okay.
Del Rio.
Okay.
That was part of the Haitian crisis
Okay.
in 2022.
Okay.
So that was part of that.
Okay.
Those numbers.
Okay.
Currently, Border Patrol is dealing with anywhere from 50 to 80 people a day in Valverde County alone, versus the Del Rio sector, they're dealing with 700 to 800 a day.
Okay. So you've got about 10% of what they're dealing with for the whole sector here in
Yes,
your county.
Here in our county.
And what kind of issues does this present? Let's start first with just the people here in this county. When we have so many more people going through the border, what is happening to the people in your county?
So Del Rio's not equipped to house people. We don't have a transportation system here. In essence, Greyhound comes through here. Back then, it used to come here 2 or 3 times a week. Now it's coming, I believe, twice a day, and that's just one bus. So we're not set up with a shelter. We have the Valverde Humanitarian Coalition that helps individuals leave our community once they're processed by Border Patrol.
Okay.
But they can only handle about 180 to probably 230 a day. And that's made up of nothing but volunteers. So, when Border Patrol gets overwhelmed and the numbers start to really impact this community, Border Patrol has to take actions to decompress what we're holding here, and they release to either the Stripe Station or to the coalition, the Humanitarian Coalition. So there's been an occasion where people have been wandering our streets, and that, it raises, our citizens are concerned. We don't know, yes, they've been processed, but, you still have to, you see individuals from different countries, people that don't really belong here in Del Rio, walking the streets, sleeping at the Stripes convenience store, per se.
Right.
So that just, it alarms people.
Okay. And how much of the border does your county have? How many miles?
So we share 110 miles of border with the Mexican state of Coahuila, and Valverde County consists of 3,200 square miles. We go about 72 miles to the west, northwest, and to the north we go about 70 plus miles.
Okay.
North, and then to the east and the south about 10 miles to the. So Del Rio is basically at the bottom pocket of Valverde County.
Okay. And we are closer on this side of the county where we are on, because we're on the eastern side. We're closer to Eagle Pass, and then 72 miles to the west, it's much more remote in that area, correct?
Yes.
And in that area, do you have people over on the western side? Do you have people who are coming up the border there?
So that's an open area that, in my opinion, there's a lot of people that don't want to get caught. That's where they go, because they got a 3 days hike or less if they're getting picked up to Interstate 10. And once they get on Interstate 10, they can go anywhere they want.
Okay.
They've circumvented all Border Patrol checkpoints at that point.
All right. And when we say things like they don't want to get caught, what happens when they are getting caught versus when they're not? Let's talk about what happens first when they are caught.
So when they are caught, they're processed by Border Patrol. Mm-hmm. So let's just go back a little bit. So
Sure.
if my people apprehend someone or detain someone, they're going to be turned over to Border Patrol. Border Patrol will take that individual. They'll go through their processing protocols.
Right.
If they have a legitimate reason to be here, or they're expecting a hearing eventually, they get let go. They're given a temporary pass to appear at a court date at a later time.
Okay.
So that's the process. Once Border Patrol processes those individuals, they either are moved to San Antonio, and that hasn't been discussed in this upcoming weeks how that's going to take place. But if they're released, they'll be released to the Humanitarian Coalition Center here in Del Rio From there, they're moved out by those individuals, or they go to the stripe station where they purchase a Greyhound bus ticket and they move on their own.
Okay, and just for people who maybe aren't familiar, a stripe station, that is a gas station, a convenience store.
That is a small convenience store.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So it may not be called Stripes where you live, but we all know what a gas station looks like. And I've seen quite a few of them as I've been driving through Texas the past couple of days. So those are kind of the people who we may see on the news, who they talk about the children and the people who want to come to America more for a better life. And we can debate, and I always more than happy to have these debates about whether all of the rules and laws are being followed with that. But then when they don't want to get caught and they don't want to go through that very lenient process of being caught where they just get released to a court date at some future time, what's going on with those people who don't want to be caught?
So we don't know what's going on with those people because we don't know what's coming out in those areas that are very remote. Mm-hmm. You could have, people smuggling drugs. You could have criminals coming through there. We just don't know because we don't know what's coming through there.
And do you wind up, do your deputies wind up catching people further north than just along the border within your county, like a little bit deeper in, or does that happen very often?
So on occasion, but a lot of times, they're already bypassed all of Border Patrol and all of us, and they're just basically going through ranch land to rural areas, and they're on the move.
They're on the move. And then once they get on I-10, that is an east-west expressway that is here in Texas. It goes, I think, all the way to California and all the way east. So that pretty much, once you're on the interstate system, then you can go anywhere in the country, right?
You can move about anywhere, yes.
And there are no Border Patrol stations along the interstate, are there?
So there's one in Sierra Blanca that handles the eastbound traffic, but there's nothing that handles the westbound traffic till you move beyond El Paso.
Okay.
So they're just strategically located, but it's not going to catch everybody because you can turn off of 10 and go north on any farm to market road, any state highway, and you basically circumvented checkpoints.
And once you go on 10, you could go even further north, and you've got 10, show me on the map, where is 10?
So 10 is right
10
here,
is up there.
drops into San Antonio, and that's 20 that goes to Dallas, Fort Worth area.
Okay, so once you're on it, if you really wanted to get around it, then if you get to 10, then you could go on any one of those other state roads and keep going further north and get on 20, and then from 20 go on in other parts of the country.
Yes.
That's why we called our documentary back in 2014 Border States of America, because it isn't just right here in Texas. Once we're on the interstate system, it winds up making every state a border state.
Yes. So once you circumvent anything along the border, basically the border is the first line of defense. After you go beyond that, you can run anywhere you want to in the country.
And for people who are listening, I think that some people, if you haven't tracked this issue very closely, it's kind of shocking to hear that. It's a little bit jarring, but that's how drugs move through the country. That's how people who are doing bad things that they don't want to get caught are able to move through.
Yes.
When they are caught, so when they're going through the processing center, it doesn't seem like are they sending many people back out of the country when they move through there, or does that happen once they're in the hearing?
So, and I don't know what the process is. I know that they did expel some when we had the Haitian crisis here, especially they were expelling the Mexicans, the Hondurans, the Guatemalans, and the El Sals. They were sending them back.
Okay.
So coming up in the next couple of weeks, I don't know what populations will be sent back. I know that more than likely the criminal element will be sent back, and everybody else that is not will be afforded an opportunity to present their case in court. As
we are dealing with the news of the day, we've heard of a recent incident where there was an immigrant who was here who had been deported previously, and he came back to America. So he wasn't supposed to be here. Clearly, he was here illegally. And he wound up shooting and killing several people in Cleveland, Texas. How does this happen where people are deported and then they wind up being back in our country? What's going on with that?
So, that's part of the problem because it's an unsecure border. People get deported, they make their way back, they get caught, they get deported again. I'm interested in learning, what were the circumstances on the 3 or 4 other deportations? Where was he at? Did they happen right at the border? Did he get caught, coming across the river? But, that's part of a broken system, and people will take advantage of it.
And when they're deported, if they come back into the country, are they normally going through the means where they might get caught, or when they're coming back through? Are these the kind of people who you're talking about who don't want to get caught?
These are probably the kind of people that don't want to get caught.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important. Some people say, "Oh, it's a humanitarian problem. There are people who need to get out of bad circumstances where they live." Well, if you're not obeying the law and you create a situation where essentially lawlessness is happening, then we wind up with these kind of problems where people take advantage of it.
Yes. And it's that kind of people that don't need to be here.
And it's that kind of people why we do need to secure our border.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Now, back in 2014, one of the things that you said to me, we could deal with a lot of the problems that we have along the border if we just obeyed the laws. Do you feel like the laws are being obeyed right now?
So, and it's in my opinion, it's both parties' fault because neither one is playing by the rules. And I've referred it back then. It's like, it's like a football game. Each side has the ball, they move it to the 40-yard line, and they punt over. And nobody's ever going to score a touchdown. So, in my opinion, nothing's ever going to get done until both sides or the middle comes together and works together to solve the problem.
And for those who are listening, you're not a Republican, are you?
No.
No. So just so that people understand, you think the border needs to be secure, and you're not a Republican. You're a man who lives on the border, and it's your duty and job to protect the people in your county who also live along the border.
Yes. And
that's your goal and your objective.
That's my objective. Our objective as a law enforcement officer is not, when the phone rings in my dispatch, we don't ask if they're a Republican or Democrat.
Right.
We're here to serve. And by serving, we're going to protect our community.
Right. So what do you think needs to be done to strengthen the border?
So, I think both sides need to come together and enforce what's there, come up with a solution that both sides can live with moving forward to allow people that are fleeing their hardships in their country a process that they can legally be here. If not, they need to go back.
Right. It seems pretty simple.
It does.
But I've been tracking this issue for nearly a decade, maybe even over a decade at this point. And what I see also is not a lot of political will to pass laws to actually change the law of the land. I have seen differences between the presidents. So I've seen 3 different presidents, but I think part of what we're about to see right now when Title 42 expires is a problem in that it's changing on a whim. I mean, it's changing. It's not on a whim, but it's changing because of things that presidents have done rather than a law being passed and being firm and secure. When presidents change it, it seems like it creates some chaos.
It creates havoc, because the rules that are in the books are not being followed. And, no matter what party is there, the guys in green, Border Patrol, our federal partners, they're doing their best with what they have to deal with situations that they've been dealt with. My hat's off to them. They've helped me keep my community safe. Not one individual that has come across the border here in Valverde County has stayed in Del Rio or Valverde County. They're not coming, from throughout the world to stay in Del Rio, Texas.
Right.
They're moving throughout they're moving throughout the United States.
A few minutes ago, you said something about how when they're processed, they move on to San Antonio. What happens in San Antonio? The ones who are caught.
So San Antonio's a hub, and there's not much that's going to happen to them there. That's just San Antonio has a transportation infrastructure, be it by bus, by airline, and they're going to get help from somehow. They're going to get money shipped to them. A lot of them have had money, previously have had money. The Venezuelan people, when they got here, they all had money. They all purchased their bus tickets or their airlines tickets, and they were gone. So San Antonio is just a hub.
Okay.
And I don't know at what point that community will be overwhelmed with what's possibly fixing to happen in the coming months.
And what do you think is the best case and the worst case scenario of what may be happening as Title 42 expires?
So when that expires, we've been told that there's 100 to 110,000 people along the U.S.-Mexico border right now. There's another 660,000 that are displaced in Mexico from other countries. And then you throw another 250,000 Mexican population that are probably planning to make their way up here. So you're talking about 1 million people. So you just look at that number of 1 million people, and then you go back and you see what 2021, 22, and 22 did with 260 and 480,000 people coming across. It was chaos.
Right.
Because we weren't prepared. And I want to say, you need to find a blessing in something that when we had the Haitian crisis over those 16 days, Border Patrol here learned how to process and how to move out.
Okay.
And get rid of individuals that are here, where they went to other states or other locations throughout the United States, but they learned how to process, and they got good at it. So, those are, I guess, lessons learned from a chaotic situation. So hopefully that we don't get all slammed at the same time. Back then it was Del Rio. Now I know that the Rio Grande Valley, McAllen, their numbers are climbing. They're processing 2,000 to 2,500 people on a daily basis. El Paso, their numbers are climbing. Yuma's climbing. San Diego's climbing. So at this point, we don't know where those numbers are going to be coming across.
Okay. And how do they figure out where to go? How do all these people who are coming from all over the world, apparently through our southern border, how do they know where to go to come in?
So, a lot of it's controlled by the cartels. It's all about money. And, for example, in Ciudad Acuña, there's not a very strong cartel presence there, but you go 60 miles down the road in Piedras Negras, and they are. And I'm familiar with that area because I worked it for 10 years doing narcotics works for the Texas Department of Public Safety. I worked there for about 10 years. They have a pipeline. And whether a pipeline can, they're going to move, whether it's humans, drugs, the flip-flop, both, it doesn't make a difference. And that pipeline, they got it established. That's how come to have the I-35 corridor right there, easy access. That takes them to San Antonio and right into Austin. So that's an established pipeline. So why would somebody want to reinvent the wheel? There's something there already. Just use it. And, you control the people coming into a certain location. Mm-hmm. If you're a cartel, you're going to charge them. You're going to make your money. Again, whether it's narcotics or people, you're going to make your money. It's all about money.
And they're basically on the southern side, then controlling the border and who's. Well, I don't know if control the border is the right phrase to use there or not.
So I think that the cartel, they got their they've got their spies throughout the country now. You know, over years they've been, for example, it's a drug trafficking organization out of Piedras Negras. They've been doing it for 40 years. You know, going all the way into Dallas and into Chicago from there, and then into Atlanta out of Dallas. So they're established. So they have people already throughout the country.
So they move up through Mexico and even further south of Mexico, move up through Mexico, come through the border here, get on the interstate system, and if they're dealing with drugs, then that's how we wind up with the drug supply for the drug problems in these cities across the country, the major cities as well as the small towns.
Yes.
The cartels, some people think that sounds, I don't know, they don't believe that they're really cartels that are doing anything along the border. Could you elaborate on what you know about that?
So,
not just from your sheriff, but also because you dealt in the narcotics unit.
So, they're a well-oiled machine. They're probably better equipped than most law enforcement agencies when it comes to technology. So they have deep roots, and they control. And in my opinion, they probably control the Mexican government too, to a certain point. You never see a lot of cartels being dismantled by the Mexican government.
Right.
You hardly see it. We brag here that we dismantled a cell, but that's just a cell of a certain cartel that we don't reach into Mexico. We just dismantle what's here in the United States, what's affecting us immediately. But there's somebody to take their place right away.
Kind of like a starfish.
Mm-hmm.
They just keep growing, and they don't have to have. You're not cutting off the head. At least not here in America. We're not cutting off the head of it.
We're not.
When they move through, if they're moving through in the area that we're in of your county, so on the eastern side, they still could evade checkpoints and get on the interstate system, right? So if they didn't want to be caught, or they were carrying something they didn't want to be caught, then there's still a way to do that, even though there are checkpoints. Is that correct?
So there's ways to work around it. For example, right now, there's DPS is putting a lot of pressure in Demet, Zavala, and Maverick County. So we get a little bit of the spillover. And, right in front of our building, our office here is, Farm to Market Road that takes you up to Rock Springs, the back way. And eventually you can go all the way to Fort Worth. And by going that route, you circumvent it. Any checkpoints. Now, if you got in Rock Springs, you got Border Patrol that's stationed there, but they got to be, on the road watching.
Right.
So, but we do catch a little bit of overflow because of the pressures they're putting in other locations to the east of us, and we just, they circumvent that area, end up through our area, and they're gone.
If you're someone who lives in a different part of the country that isn't anywhere near Texas, so let's say they're in Minnesota or Chicago or Georgia or wherever, they're not even near the border anywhere, what are the things you think people like that in the other parts of the heartland of the country should be aware of?
So, they're probably coming to you, to your neighborhood. Again, there probably be more activity where they're at. They're probably in a more dangerous place than we are here on the border. A lot of people think that the border is a war zone. Well, it's not a war zone. There's a lot of activity going on, but just look at down the road 150 miles, San Antonio. There's a shooting or a killing every day, 2 or 3 a day, and they're in the interior. I don't know what the stats are in Chicago, but look at those numbers. Right. I think they lead the nation.
Right.
So they're and these people, they're not coming to stay at the border. They didn't travel thousands and thousands of miles to stay on the border. They're going to go someplace else. And Del Rio, Eagle Pass, Sanderson, they're not coming to stay there. They're going to other communities throughout the country.
And if there are 1 million people who are coming, like we think that it might be, that is a lot of people. That is, there are communities in this country, counties, plenty of counties in this country that don't even have 1 million people. There are states that are very small. This is a lot of people to be coming just in a flood across the border.
Yes. So to give you an example, about Verde County, probably 48 to 49,000 people.
Okay.
Over a 16-day period during the Haitian crisis that we experienced here, we processed right at 19,000 people.
Wow.
So almost half of our population over a 16-day period.
And those people just kept on going. So I think that it's important for the listeners and the viewers to go back and think about the size of where they live right now and what that would be like if that many people were coming across into their community all at one time. That puts a tremendous strain on local resources. And then be aware that the people who are moving through here in your county, the county we're in today, they're going to be in other counties across the country. They're not just staying here, as you've said.
Yes, they're going throughout.
What else do you think is really important for people to know?
You know, I think that people need to get their heads out of the sand and pay attention because this has been going on for 2 years now, and it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. And we're just going to have to deal with it. I mean, the administrations are going to have to start taking some actions. They're going to have to be accountable, and that's just the way we're headed. Our 3 years ago, we're at a different place in time, and just with what has transpired over the last 2 years, the United States of America will never be the same.
What was different 3 years ago? Besides COVID, before COVID, because COVID changed everything for a little while when the world locked down.
So that administration was locking down the borders. So all that has changed. I mean, that has changed because this administration basically had an open invitation, opened the borders, and people started coming. And I go back to, and I always talk about it, January the 18th, before this administration took office. There was a Haitian lady and her husband were crossing the Rio Grande here in Del Rio, and her body was recovered, and she drowned. Her and her husband drowned. She was pregnant at term with twins. So that year, I think we worked something like 28 drownings, and people are dying, trying to make the trek to the United States. So, but that doesn't seem to matter to anybody. There has to be a system in place that both sides, both parties can live with. At the same time, allow people the opportunity or to be able to come here legally,
right,
or go through a process that doesn't take, 7-8 years. I talked to a Venezuelan 16-year-old boy who was robbed in Acuña, coming out of the river, and he asked if he could make a phone call. I loaned him my phone. He called his brother, and I had an opportunity to talk to his brother. So his brother is an architect working in New York City, still in the process 8 years later, trying to get some legal status here. So it's just, I understand that some of those people are fleeing their governments, but there has to be something in place, like, again, that we here in the United States, we can all live with. That's acceptable.
Right. And it might not be that everyone can come, because in order to process, to do what you said and to make it not take quite so long, that it takes 8 years to process, you might not be able to have, you probably can't have 1 million people trying to immigrate every single year. And people will have to wait in line before they can even get to our country. And it's frustrating, but it isn't just the people coming across the southern border. There are people from around the entire world who want to come in. So if you're coming in and you're doing the process legally, I used to work with people who were from India, and they were in that same situation where they were waiting years and years to get their green card, I believe. And it isn't fair to them if they're going through that entire process. It's on the books legally, and they're following the entire law, for people to be able to just cut in front of them because on a whim, because the president decided, well, we're going to just not pay attention to these laws anymore.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. And I would prefer that people do it the right way. I would prefer that somebody apply from a different country and you start the process from a different country. Ideally, that would work, in my opinion, but you couldn't wait 7-8 years someplace else. So the system, it just needs to be revamped throughout.
Right. And I don't think that that's going to happen anytime soon at all.
No.
It's really, it seems to me, it's very frustrating as a citizen, understanding what's happening at the border, understanding how it's affecting all of these different communities across the entire country in many ways, a very negative manner. It's very frustrating to me that it turns into a political football, and that both sides are just tossing it back and forth, and they use it to score political points, but they don't actually, very few seem interested in actually trying to solve the problem at hand.
Yes, and that's pretty evident because our congressman has brought groups of people down here to tour the border to see the problem firsthand. 99.9% have been Republican. And I've toured with all of them. There's been probably 2 Democrats that have come. They just don't want to acknowledge that there's an issue down here. So, how are they going to work together where they can't even take a trip to view a problem?
Right. And if you don't believe that there's a problem and you're just completely ignoring it, and you have an opportunity to come and you don't even want to come look and see, it is very difficult to solve a problem that the first step, like for Alcoholics Anonymous, the first step is to acknowledge you have a problem. Mm-hmm. It's the first step. You can't solve it if you don't acknowledge it.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Well, I hope that, go ahead, were you about to say something else?
No. That's it. No, and that's you got to acknowledge that there's a problem. If not, you can't fix it.
Right. I hope that the people who are listening today understand there's a problem. And if you're listening and you've got a Democrat member of Congress, urge them to come down and look at what's going on along the border and see the impact of the lack of action and what's happening with it.
And again, I've invited people, and I'll continue to invite people. I don't care who they are. Right. Before all this got started, after 2014, and after we met, and then about 3 years ago, I had about 6 people, news anchors, on my phone. I counted the other day. I had like 78, 79. Wow. From all over the country, all over the world, because in order for people to know what's going on, they have to come, and I'm willing to show people. Ironically, right now we're not a hot spot, right? But I can, I invite people to come, and wherever they're at, go to the border and see for yourselves, to include the media, right? Because that's how the message gets out.
Well, and I think that if the media is listening to this podcast, I think it's so important to come. And you were so gracious years ago in showing us around the county and educating us and making sure that we understood what the problem was. And then your counterparts, because we spoke with other sheriffs and we spoke with Border Patrol, and I've kept in touch with some of them over the years, and others may have rotated and may not be elected anymore, but I've stayed in touch with them, and I learned so much just from being here and seeing it firsthand rather than just hearing about it on the news.
Yeah, so just to add a little more insight, along the Texas border, there's 21 border sheriffs. Each border sheriff has unique issues. If you look at Valverde County versus Kenny County, we're right on the river. Kenny County is about 20 miles inland. Sanderson's about 20 miles inland. In Brewster County, Alpine, they're I want to say about 120, if my memory serves me right, from the border. So each county has unique issues. None are alike. You can't take the same process here in Valverde County and apply it to El Paso County. The same way with the Border Patrol sectors. Each sector is unique, has its own issues, has its own shortfalls, has its own problems when it comes to securing the border. None are alike.
What are some of the different kinds of problems that one county versus another and one sector versus another face?
So you look at Laredo, for example, Webb County. You know, they probably got the technology infrastructure there, and they're going to make it simple. They probably anywhere in Webb County, you probably got cell phone coverage and radio coverage. Valverde County, you get out to the west, there's no coverage out there.
Right.
So that's a challenge to the deputies, the officers that are working. So none of them are alike. You go down to the Rio Grande Valley, you probably got phone coverage, radio coverage everywhere you go.
Right.
You know, so my difficulties would be I don't have communications in some parts of my county. So, and the further I get away from Del Rio, I lose those communications.
Which means that if you were trying to do something really nefarious, that's a good area to go through because it's harder. It's very remote, and it's harder to communicate with other people, which, if you're trying not to get caught, is actually probably a good thing.
Yes.
Then what about the sectors? Like the different, so you talked about the technology. What else? What other differences?
So for example, in the Rio Grande Valley, I believe that their number of personnel is 3,600. In the Del Rio sector, I believe it's 1,800.
Wow, half. Half.
So, and we're probably a bigger area.
Right.
But we probably have less population overall. So those are just some of the differences. You can't from county to county. It's not a cookie cutter type deal. Each county has different needs, different shortfalls. You know, I have a total of 48 officers to include myself. I divide that by 2 because some are in civil warrants, transport, and CID. So I've got on the road patrol deputies. I got about 24. So there's different challenges for everyone.
Right. I remember speaking a few years ago to Sheriff Daniels in Cochise County in Arizona, and he said our problems here are so much different than what they're facing over in Texas. He said in Texas they're dealing with people coming in and moving across the border, and here we're dealing with a drug problem, and it's interesting the kind of problems that you encounter as people are moving across as well.
Yeah, so the cartels, they control the movement of drugs and stuff like that, movement of people. So it just depends who's in charge on the south side.
Wow.
So there's a difference.
I remember back in 2014, one of the things that you said back then is that sometimes the cartels will flood a certain area, perhaps with people moving through, and all of our Border Patrol or sheriffs are focused on that particular area, especially if it's humans who are trying to be caught and then released. And that diverts your attention. So then if they want to run other things that they don't want to get caught, they know you're focusing over in the area that's really hot, and they kind of have a freer pass, I guess.
Yeah, and that's just a tactic that they use, and it's not just here in Texas; it's across the southwest border.
Yeah, that was something in the very beginning of my process of learning about this. It just sort of, I didn't know until you explained it to me. And I was like, wow, it just has always stuck with me. And I explained that to people whenever I talk about going to the border. I'm like, you have to understand there are different problems, and the cartels will have we focus on the shiny light, and then they're off doing something. It's almost like a sleight of hand.
Right.
Well, is there anything else that we should focus on that you would want people to be thinking about as they're thinking about this problem, or to know?
So right now, I don't see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel moving forward sadly, over the next 3 months. We'll see. I have to wait and see. But the message that needs to get out there, I think the message needs to be sent out to the public, and the public needs to be made aware that, there's issues, they need to be addressed, and they need to pay attention.
Okay. And so we've highlighted many of those issues. If you're a politician, an elected official, a part of the media, and they want to come see the border, they probably could reach out to you. I don't want to flood your office with people just reaching out.
I'm sure Sheriff Wilmot, Sheriff Daniels, myself, Sheriff Guerra, Sheriff Benny Martinez, they'll be willing to show the media as to what's going on the southwest border. Sheriff Benny Martinez in Brooks County, he's removed from the border, but he leads all the border in number of deaths there.
And why is that?
It's because, according, I've heard him tell that you get the smugglers coming across, and they tell them they put the people out to walk to circumvent the checkpoint. It says right over that horizon over there is Houston. And, that's very, very dry, hot area. And I think he has 2 mobile morgues in his county.
And the terrain is very unforgiving, especially if you're walking. It is hot and dry, and in the summertime, it's just April, and where I was yesterday, a little bit west of here, it was in the 90s. Today it wasn't so hot; it's a little overcast, but
yeah. So generally around here during the summer, 102, 104, 108, occasionally 112. If you're out to the western part of the county, there's real rugged terrain, limited water. If you go down to south of Eagle Pass, it's flat brushland. It makes it easier to walk in that area. Also have easier access to other roads that lead to Interstate 35. So our deaths will probably rise during the summer months.
And that is when we're looking at the surge as well. So
yes.
It's we need to make sure people are aware, and I would urge them to call your congressman and tell your congressman to take action, because
take note.
Mm-hmm. And if you notice that you've got an increase in drug problems in your local area, it's because we've got an open border right now, and our laws are not being followed.
Exactly.
Well, Sheriff Martinez, thank you so much for having me here today in your county and your sheriff's office. I really appreciate it, and appreciate your hospitality, and also the fact that you've educated me so much.
It's always a pleasure.
And we appreciate this. If you want more information about our documentary, Border States of America, you can find that actually on YouTube by searching for Tea Party Patriots, Border States of America.
The Jenny Beth Show is hosted by Jenny Beth Martin, produced by Kevin Mooneyhan, and directed by Luke Livingston. The Jenny Beth Show is a production of Tea Party Patriots Action. For more information, visit teapartypatriots.org.
If you enjoyed this episode and want to stop freedom thieves from turning our country into a communist nightmare, be sure to click the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And while you're at it, click the notifications bell to get an alert every time we post a new episode.